I got your message. And so I think both of your questions, one and two, are actually kind of two sides of the same thing. Something to note right here: you understood that opposite equals A, hypotenuse does absolute equal C, and adjacent equals B. That's not strictly true. So angle A and side A are opposites each other, but A doesn't have to be the opposite. So in other words, if I have a triangle, let me get my keyboard out of the way and get to my thing where I can write. So if I have a triangle, if that's my right angle, that side has to be C. I can mark this A or B, but for the exact same triangle, again, pretend like that's a right triangle, so that's C. I could also mark this B and A. Both of those are correct. The important thing is if you have this one angle side A, then this is angle A. If you have that one labeled B, then this is angle B. So the A's and B's are kind of interchangeable in terms of which one of the two legs. So the C is the hypotenuse, so that one's always C, but the legs, those are interchangeable, which one you label A and B, which might have been messing you up a little bit because it felt really inconsistent. So then let me head over to your questions 8 through 10, and it looks like kind of the gist of your question is like, how do you know you have to use cosine rather than tangent, or sine versus something else? And that's kind of the same thing as when do you multiply or divide. Totally depends on which one of those pieces you have. So let me hop over to, I think I have it open already. Yep. So this is your questions 8 through 10. So let's use those as just kind of a jumping off point for how we know which trig function to use and then which arithmetic operation, multiplication or division, would go along with that. So for this first question, get rid of those. Let me go to black here. We have a triangle, and it looks like it's going to be a 45. And we know C is 16, so we have the hypotenuse. And then I could label, and this one with 45, they're both 45, right? I can label that one, that's kind of an ugly 45 degrees. And since I'm calling that A, that would make this side A. But what's more interesting is that this is the opposite side, that angle, and this is the adjacent side. So rather than hanging up on the A and the B, think of it relative to how you drew the angle. And I can label this either way. I can label it X and Y, actually, which sometimes to me is better. But from there, we also have, right, SOHCAHTOA. And so if I wanted to find the opposite side first, I have the hypotenuse, right? I have H. So I can't use tangent, because for tangent, I need to know opposite and adjacent, and I don't know either of those. So I can either use sine or cosine. If I use sine, I'm going to get the opposite side. I would get this. If I use cosine, I'm going to get the adjacent side first. I would get that. And I can do either of those. In this case, because it's a 45, they're equal. So once I do one, just like you got over here, that means I have them both. But if this had been, 43 degrees, for instance, instead of a nice number like 45, I could do sine, and then that would give me, again with the hypotenuse, this would be opposite the thing I don't know, so we'll call that, I'm going to call it y, just to avoid the a's and the b's. And that would be over 16. Oops, and I didn't even write that was really dumb. Didn't put my angle in there. Sine of 45 would equal y over 16, so opposite over hypotenuse. And then in this case, once I have my equation set up, now I can see what math I need to do. Since the thing I'm solving for is being divided by 16, to undo that 16, that's where I would multiply. And then plugging that into a calculator, or in this case using the exact value since it's 45, would give me the y, which is what you got there. Same thing if I wanted to find the adjacent side. So now that I know the opposite side, I could use tangent, right? Because tangent, I know opposite and adjacent. Seems easier just to use cosine though. So cosine of 45, that would equal the adjacent side, which I'll call x just because it's running horizontally, over 16, and then the exact same math. So again, the way that I know that I have to multiply is because I'm looking for this numerator and the 16 is dividing. So I would want to do whatever math I gotta do to get that x by itself. So let's say I had gone tangent, just because that gives me a little bit different version. So if I had tangent of 45, and again, I wouldn't want to solve for the second one because I know they're going to come out the same because of the 45, but just to kind of extend this example, and that was opposite over adjacent. So up here I had solved for opposite, and we got the 8 root 2 that you did. So then I would have 8 root 2 over adjacent, which again I'll call x. And so now here is where we got to, again, figure out how to get that x by itself. So to do that, that x is in the denominator, and that's why I actually wanted to show you this one. So for that, we would need to multiply both sides by x. And then let me scoot that up a little bit. So then I would have x times tangent of 45 degrees equals 8 root 2, and still trying to, and we don't want to, we wanted to get the x up out of the numerator, out of the denominator, so that's why I'm multiplying both sides by x. And now to finish getting that by itself, I would have to divide both sides by tangent of 45. And then that's what I'm putting into the calculator. Or if it's an exact value, I could do that as well in the solve. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more, and I'll do another example here. But so looking at what I was given, which was hypotenuse, I started with, okay, I can either find opposite using sine or I can find adjacent using cosine. And that's what I did there. And again, on both of those, the thing I was solving for was in the numerator, so I just had to multiply both sides by the denominator to clear it. Here you can see if I use tangent, it got a little trickier. Sometimes it happens, it's fine. It's just that's where you bring the x up and then bring the tangent down. And basically you're just going to do whatever math you need to do to get that variable you're looking for up in the numerator and then by itself. So let's look at the next one. So for this one, we're given a side and its opposite. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll just kind of draw a triangle here. Not a very good one. And we'll have that be, sorry, that's my dog coming through. She's big. 24, if that's the angle, then the side opposite would be the B, which is 18. And so in this case, I don't know the hypotenuse. I don't know the adjacent, but I do know the opposite. And so if I think through my SOHCAHTOA, I want to pick one of the two that has opposite in it because that's the thing I know. So I could use sine, opposite, sine of 24 is the opposite, which should be 18, over the hypotenuse. Just call it h for hypotenuse. And then this is kind of like that one I just did where I'd multiply up the h and get sine of 24 equals 18, and then divide the sine over, and then that will give me 18 over sine 24 to get that h. That will probably be kind of an ugly number, whatever. Yeah, okay, that was an ugly number. Actually, it should have been that number right there. And so I'm not sure I would use that in my next calculation. I would probably go to, so I just use sine and I need to get adjacent. So I'd probably use tangent just because I'd rather work with that 18 than with the 44.2547 number. Like that just seems like I'll mess it up. You could totally put cosine of 24 equals adjacent over that 44.2547. That would get you the adjacent side. Or you could do tangent of 24 equals opposite, which again was 18 over adjacent. I'll just call that one A this time. I should use a lowercase so it's not the angle. And then same math as before. Multiply up the A and then divide over the tangent 24. And that would get you the adjacent. Likewise, I could have done cosine. So if I had done cosine of 24, that would equal the adjacent, the thing I don't know, over the answer we got right here, which would have been 44.2547, and multiplied that up and got A that way. And I should be using a lowercase a. So this number and then the 44.2547 times cosine 24, those should come out the same. And so there's always a couple of ways to get there. And they're both right. You just have to be careful with how you have things labeled. And again, rather than the A's, B's, and C's, I would really think of it as either X's or Y's if we're thinking of it in the 5-2 way, or opposite and adjacent hypotenuse, rather than those A, B, and C's. The C is good because, again, that's always the hypotenuse. But in terms of setting this up and figuring out what math to do, hopefully that clarified a little bit in terms of how I'm labeling that and approaching them. Let me know if you have follow-up questions, and if it's still a struggle, you can also shoot me a message to meet if you like.